Good morning.
Morning.
Is everyone ready to go? Yes? Good to go? Excellent. Well, today we're announcing that the Palaszczuk government will introduce a new planning regulation that will allow homeowners to rent secondary dwellings on the open market. Until now, there was a regulation in place that meant that homeowners really should only have rented those properties to their own family members. So this means that secondary dwellings, sometimes known as granny flats, can now be widely rented. We know some people have already been renting their granny flats given the current shortage of rental properties. They probably didn't know that they shouldn't. This new regulation will make those arrangements legal. It will also allow for all of the same rules and protections for tenants and landlords that apply to general renting. Will also now apply where renting secondary dwellings. Of course, they will still need to comply with all council regulations, building codes, as well as fire safety regulations. So they may need to get them safety inspected, may need to upgrade the smoke alarms, that kind of thing. New secondary dwellings will still need council approvals, but once built, they can be rented to anyone who comes along. This is a common sense outcome. It was a recommendation from our housing roundtable last week. It gives a good indication of the kind of things that we can do now to unlock supply. The feedback from the roundtable was that given the shortage of builders and building equipment, building supplies, that the easiest way, the best way to get new stock on the market was to repurpose and make available dwellings that are already constructed. And this is one simple step we can do to unlock those properties. We've all been saddened to hear the stories about people sleeping in their cars, mums sleeping in their cars, sometimes grannies sleeping in their cars. This is our chance to get those grannies out of cars and into granny flats, into a decent property. And so we're calling out today for all Queensland homeowners who might have a secondary dwelling to think about whether they can rent it out. It's a chance to make a little bit more money, but also to put a roof over the head of a fellow Queenslander. These new arrangements will be reviewed after 3 years to ensure that there have been no unintended consequences. We're also today highlighting the fact that there is 1 week left for people to apply for our Catalytic infrastructure fund. This is a $150 million fund that was in the most recent state budget. It's designed to partner with councils, utilities and developers to help them to fund the infrastructure that they need to bring new greenfield land lots to the market. And so 1 more week, and we look forward to receiving those applications so that we can help unlock more land supply. We have Minister Enoch, our Housing Minister, and Shannon from the Planning Institute of Australia to comment on today's announcement.
Well, thank you, Deputy Premier, and of course this is a very welcomed announcement and came directly from the conversations that had occurred during the recent roundtable that the Premier herself had chaired. These emergency planning measures really make a huge difference in being able to bring more stock to market quicker than we would be seeing if we had to build those properties. These properties will, of course, see those protections from the Residential Tenancy Act, meaning that those residential tenancy agreements can come into place and all parties are protected as a result of that. I can also announce today that the annual housing data sets will be released later today by the Department of Communities, Housing and Digital Economy, as they are every year. There are some encouraging signs in the data that will be released later today. That data includes, of course, data related to the Social Housing Register. The Social Housing Register, it appears as though there is some promising data that indicates that there's some stabilisation occurring. We're seeing almost 500 fewer households and over 4,000 fewer people on the register compared to this time last year. The data also indicates that single people, including people over the age of 55, now make up the majority of those on the Social Housing Register. and that there are more people living with a disability now on the social housing register. That's why our building program has been committed to building more 1 and 2 bedroom units, and why we are committed to ensuring that we're building to high livability standards. In fact, all of the new builds, of all of the new commencements, of last financial year, almost 90% of those are for 1 and 2 bedroom units, which is reflecting what's going on in the social housing register. There's also been in terms of the number of allocations of social housing, we're seeing that has reduced in this latest data set. That's a bit of an indication, of course, that there's not a lot of mobility happening. People are utilising social housing properties for longer, which is understandable given what we're seeing right across the whole housing market. We know that people who are able to secure housing are staying there longer. And that's the same case that we're seeing in the social housing register data. There's also a reduction in the number of new applicants on the social housing register. But of course, this is the social housing register, and social housing is not for all Queenslanders. We know that not all Queenslanders live in social housing or are eligible for social housing. But we also know that there are more Queenslanders turning to government and to social services support for that support right now, as we're experiencing the incredible pressures that we're seeing right across the housing service sector. That's why last year the Palaszczuk government announced a $2.9 billion investment in social and affordable housing, the largest concentrated investment in Queensland's history, which will see 7,400 new social and affordable homes commenced by June 30, 2025. And that's also why, just a few months ago during the budget, the Premier and myself announced a $16 million immediate housing response package, funding that ensured that we could expand our rental subsidy scheme from $5,000 over 6 months to $10,000 over 12 months to help people secure their current tenancy in the private market, or to potentially secure another one. And of course to put more funding into our homelessness services for brokerage funding for emergency temporary accommodation, and for those workers that are needed in that system. And of course, following the round table, as a direct result of those conversations, a further $5 million has been put to that immediate housing response package, ensuring that there is more money for brokerage funding, and of course more funding for our homelessness services to secure the workers that they need to be able to support more Queenslanders. That's also why we've had our Help to Home initiative, looking at every possible way to get more stock into the system. The Help to Home initiative is a head leasing initiative. We're looking for up to 1,000 head leases across Queensland. So if Queenslanders who have a second property, an investment property, a new-to-market property, you may have had your properties on short-term holiday letting, Airbnb, etc., we're offering that opportunity to provide a roof over another Queenslander's head through our Help to Home initiative. We guarantee 2 years rent, 3 months in advance and quarterly from there, and of course underwrite that scheme to ensure that your property is returned to you in the conditions that you would expect it to. That's why this year we also announced funding for the Housing Older Women's strategy, and why just recently I announced $6 million for a specialist homelessness service for older women in particular, and why at the last budget we saw nearly $30 million allocated for youth homelessness. So there are an incredible array of programs and initiatives that are underway, including what we've seen today, to be able to ease the pressures that we're seeing in Queensland. And of course, we're not unique. We're seeing this right across the country. That's why the roundtable and the summit has been so incredibly important. What we'll see in the summit in October is, of course, levels of government, building industry, housing service system, all of those players from across the housing sector are coming together to bring their expertise and, of course, find solutions like we have seen today from the Deputy Premier. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Deputy Premier, and good morning. The Planning Institute of Australia welcomes these changes, as they will support an increase in housing diversity and they will provide more homes for Queenslanders. We're pleased that the government has taken forward one of the proposals that we did share at the Housing Roundtable last week, and we look forward to continuing that with them. Our communities are changing, and along with it, people's expectations around accessibility of different housing types. Granny flats, or secondary dwellings as they're known, are an affordable option for many people, from students to young professionals through to retirees. As Queensland grows, we will need more diverse housing types, so the announcement today is a good first step in making this happen. Planning will play an important role in facilitating more diverse housing types as they suit people in different stages of their lives and at different price points. We look forward to sharing more ideas and being part of the discussion as part of the Housing Summit next month. Thank you.
Minister Enoch, is there an indication of how many underutilised granny flats there are in Queensland?
Obviously that is a number that we're all looking forward to finding some more information about. But right now, this announcement by the Deputy Premier is absolutely welcomed. Where there is that opportunity to provide those standalone or secondary dwellings as they're known, self-contained units to the market, absolutely, whatever is happening out there, that's what we need into the system right now. And it's an incredibly encouraging announcement today, very much welcomed by many.
How much of the 150 million has been spent in that the land supply grants for the catalytic infrastructure?
So this is a new allocation of $150 million. So we have had previous rounds from previous budgets, including a $5.9 million investment in Ripley Valley to construct a road there that unlocked 5,500 lots, and $13 million for the new Cumnor Road, also in Ripley Valley, which unlocked 8,900 lots. So,
sorry, I meant as in how many people have applied so far, like how much of the funds are remaining?
So the applications haven't been assessed yet, so none of that funding has yet been allocated.
Mr. Miles, why in this current climate would you be risking a new land tax which could drive up rents?
The measures put in place in the budget are designed to ensure that we can deliver the services that Queensland needs. So every dollar raised from our revenue measures goes into our schools and our hospitals, building roads and indeed building houses.
So are you personally supportive of this land tax change?
I'm a member of the Cabinet. The Cabinet, of course, endorsed every measure in the budget.
So you do support it?
Yes.
So surely repealing the tax could have a far greater impact than the granny flat changes you're changing today.
Well, no, I think if you look at the analysis that has been done on the potential impact of that tax, most experts have agreed that it's likely to be marginal at the best. This measure, we hope, will unlock thousands of properties.
So they are saying that it could potentially drive up rent. So my other question is, why did this government lie about there being no new taxes?
This is not a new tax, it's an adjustment to how the threshold is calculated for the tax.
It will mean that Queenslanders are paying more on their rents potentially, so it is a new tax on Queensland.
It will mean that those property holders who have been exploiting a loophole by buying properties in other states, that incentive to buy those properties in other states will be removed.
On this announcement, what are the tax implications of this announcement?
The landholders who rent these properties will have to declare that income. We expect in some cases they'll be able to rent their granny flats for $200, maybe $300 a week. That's extra money in their household budget, but it also should be properly declared to the federal government.
What about land tax in this instance?
That will depend on the arrangements of the individual property. In the case of renting a secondary dwelling on their principal place of residence, I don't think it would attract land tax, but we can get that detail for you.
Where that could be applicable though?
There are circumstances where the granny flat is on another investment property, the investment property itself, so obviously people will need to get their own advice about how their individual circumstances attract land tax.
Change the legislation so people who try to do this won't be slugged with new taxes?
There's certainly no intention for this to be a revenue measure in any way other than for the households who rent those
So will
properties.
the government try to exempt people, because there are certain circumstances, say if there's more than two two leases in a granny flat, or if someone moves into the granny flat to rent out their house to another bigger family. It's great moves if we want to get people into housing, but those moves would result in people being based on increased land tax.
Look, I'm not a tax advisor, Tim, but my understanding would be if that property remained their principal place of residence, then it would continue to be exempt from land tax.
Stephen, the DNA threshold, when you were Health Minister in 2018, were you aware of those changes?
I was not aware of the issues that have now been raised, and obviously they're very concerning. In my experience, the pathology staff that I dealt with were incredibly diligent and hardworking, and so I'm as surprised as anybody to hear these concerns.
Given how serious this threshold issue is and killers rapers walking free as a result of that, should you have known?
Queensland Health is a very, very large organisation. These are technical decisions that are, by and large, made by the scientific services themselves. Obviously, if these concerns were raised at that time, I would have taken them very seriously. I'm concerned to hear them now, but we are doing what we can now to get to the bottom of it. We have the investigation underway. We should let that run its course. And you've heard other members of the government indicate that we will take whatever actions are necessary to implement recommendations and ensure that justice is best served.
Did your department fail to brief you?
I certainly wasn't aware of these concerns, but now that they've come to light, I'm obviously disappointed and surprised, and we will continue to do what we can to get to the bottom of exactly what's happened and exactly what we need to do.
The delay has been unacceptable, though, hasn't it? Yvette Darth, is her job safe?
Oh, very much so. Look, I understand the LNP are out there calling for people to be sacked today. That seems to be their answer for everything. They're always wanting to sack someone. This is a matter that is very serious and is being properly investigated, and we should let that process run its course.
Are you expecting to be called for the inquiry?
Nobody's indicated to me that would happen.
Are you going to be making inquiries though within your department about why you weren't told as Health Minister at the time?
Well, it's not my department anymore, so
But you were the Health Minister at the time.
at the time I was, yes.
Okay, we saw that news that a man died in his driveway waiting more than 4 hours for an ambulance. Queensland Ambulance says the wait time is too long for him. I mean, this happened in 1 year after we first raised reports about the issues of people waiting for ambulances for too long, and the government says they were going to be looking at it. Did the government do enough to seriously tackle that problem at the time when those reports were raised back in February, March 2021, to still have someone dying waiting for an ambulance a year later?
We've consistently increased our investment into both ambulance services, emergency department services and hospitals. We are continuing to see year-on-year surges in demand for all of those services. I know that our paramedics, our ambulance services work absolutely as hard as they can to save every life, and their response times for the most critical of cases are always very good, but obviously these circumstances are tragic where they are unable to respond in the time that they would like to. I know that they do their very, very best to take care of Queenslanders every day.
You can't say they're always very good. There was another person waiting that night, 3 hours and 46 minutes for code 1. Most urgent, that's lights and sirens.
Yeah, response times for Code 1A continue to be good, but you're right. Sometimes there is such a large surge of demand on the system that they have to prioritise cases, and sometimes that means they take longer to get to people than they would like to do.
Are you confident the government did enough, given the warnings that were there and the cases that we were seeing 1 year before this man's death? The government did do enough to try to get the ambulance service ready?
We continue to invest record amounts into our ambulance service. We continue to employ more paramedics, to open new stations, to buy new vehicles and equipment, and that is all about ensuring that Queenslanders have access to the emergency health care that they need.
With the granny flats, will this require legislative changes, and when will it come into effect?
So this is subordinate legislation, so we're doing it by regulation through the planning regulation. We expect it to go to Governor and Council very, very soon.
What will the findings of the Mackay Hospital review be made public?
I'm happy to get your response on that.
Back to the DNA question for a second. The two staff members that have been stood down, why have they, I know you want to wait until the inquiry gets underway, but they've been stood down already. Why have they been stood down?
That's a level of detail you should put to the Health Minister.
Would you support John T. Bush's call for the possible removal of double jeopardy orders?
I've seen Jonty's post, and I'm certainly happy to get more of a detailed briefing about that. We've said that once the inquiry is concluded, we will do everything that we can to implement those recommendations that we received.
Does this mess at the forensic lab, is this the worst in the history, criminal history of this state?
I think we should let this investigation play its course. I think the investigator is doing a very, very good job. I think we should see what the investigation says, and then we will wholeheartedly seek to implement those recommendations.
Are the women involved in the Mackay Hospital review being asked to sign non-disclosure agreements?
I'm not aware of that.
The flooding in the government of Gold Coast, are you aware of what is the government doing to help people that have been hit by these massive thunderstorms overnight?
Very concerned to hear of the weather event on the Gold Coast overnight, and I understand there is some chance of severe weather over the coming weekend. We'd urge everyone to heed those weather reports. Obviously, if it's flooded, forget it. Listen to the warnings. I understand that one person was rescued by police overnight, and Swiftwater rescue teams were involved, and of course to those heroes who every day stand prepared to save Queenslanders' lives when they're needed, thank them for their service.
Residents were getting alerts at like midnight. Could you see why people maybe lost faith in the Weather Bureau when they do get these alerts in the middle of the night?
And I'm not aware of that instance you're referring to there, Rachel, but the Weather Bureau does their very best to predict what sometimes is unpredictable, the weather, and we just need people to heed those warnings when they come to keep themselves and their families safe.
There's a book that's been published describing some of the details of people's experiences being locked out of the state during the COVID pandemic. Some of them are asking for acknowledgement from the government. Is that something that the Palaszczuk government is doing?
I think throughout we acknowledged the hardship that those measures were causing. We had to make very difficult decisions, and ultimately those decisions kept Queenslanders safe. But we did accept at the time, we did acknowledge at the time that they did cause hardship, and we never took those decisions lightly. We always sought to minimise that hardship while keeping Queenslanders safe.
Just back on Granny Flats.
Yes.
Is this about opening up more opportunities for other types of tiny homes as well to be constructed, and will tiny homes on wheels also be considered as part of this?
Potentially, they're the kinds of things that homeowners could look at. They're subject to various council regulations as well, so this announcement today will have most applicability to people who already have those secondary dwellings. They can now legally, and with the full protections of the Residential Tenancies Act, rent those properties out on the open market. But we expect that some people will now look at whether they've got vacant land that they might be able to add a secondary dwelling to, of course with all of the appropriate council approvals.
Dr. Miles, there's quite a number of secondary dwellings on Airbnb rented out for $100 a night or so. How are you going to convince people to take them off that platform and rent them to people at a much lower price?
Well, this is more likely to appeal to those who currently have those properties vacant, those dwellings vacant, and so really the call is to those folk. Of course, there are advantages now that they can be long-term tenanted that might make people who have them on the short-term market think again. You know, the chance to have secure, longer-term secure income, as well as the protection of a tenancy deed. So some people will take that into account. This is primarily about saying to people who have a granny flat that maybe was on the property that they bought and they've never used, or had someone in it that's since moved out and the teenagers have grown up, now is a great chance for them to earn an extra few $100 a week, as well as provide a house for another Queenslander.
Could it really say that this is expected to help thousands of Queenslanders though, given we don't know the number, and most of the time granny flats are purpose-built for a loved one or a family member to be living in there?
Look, anecdotally, we've heard a lot of stories about people who have these properties and would like to rent them out. We'll have to see how it goes, and that's why we've said we'll implement it immediately but review it in 3 years' time. Some local governments will have data about the number of these properties that have got council approval. Of course, until now it's been, strictly speaking, in most parts of the state illegal for them to rent them out, and so this provides full legal protections to the tenants as well as landholders.
Reviewing this scheme in 3 years' time because there might be unintended consequences. Will you commit to reviewing the land tax changes in case there are also unintended consequences on the housing?
To be very clear, this is an intention to review this regulation in 3 years' time to see how it's working, see if it can be improved.
All right, you have to go.
I do actually have to go. Thank you.